Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway. Welcome back, guys. I'm back with Claudine, and today we are talking about the 30th anniversary of one of the sections of the Louvre that I cannot pronounce. So I'll let Claudine have all the fun with that, so you guys can learn how to pronounce it correctly as well.
Yeah, well, I could pronounce it all thanks to a French pompier. And so, surprisingly, I was able to be with a French pompier and retain enough information to say a word correctly. It's a struggle.
It is.
But the Louvre, we talked about it back in August because it was the 230th anniversary of the Louvre itself. But we're talking specifically, there's two special things that happen on November 18th, specifically, both in 1793 and then in 1993. So it's a very significant day. They do this a lot in France. Like you have, December 2nd, 1804 is the day that Napoleon crowned himself emperor. Well, then later down the road, it was December 2nd as well that Napoleon III decided to have a coup d'etat and name himself from president, being the first president of France to becoming an emperor himself. So I do love, as a historian and then somebody that just loves these kind of dates, I love that they kind of pick these dates and they're like, nope, that's the day we're going to do it again.
Yeah, it's very random.
It is very random. But the Louvre itself, as we know, is very old, and we've talked about it a few times, but I've never actually, we should do like a 4-month series of every week it's about the Louvre, because I could easily do that. But the Louvre itself, as you know, if you go to the Louvre, it spans from 1190 all the way up to basically 1993. And so with the Louvre, you have all these different rulers. It started with Francois Premier, who started what we start to see today of the 16th century. Originally, Philippe Auguste did the, medieval, when it was just a medieval fortress. But we are talking today about something that Napoleon III did. And I just gave somebody a tour today of the Louvre, and we were talking about that. And he knew a lot about Napoleon III. And he was like, they really didn't like him. And I was like, yeah, but it's actually Napoleon III who did the most for the way that Paris looks today, with what they did through the city with Baron Haussmann, what he did at the Louvre, all of these other buildings. And so he might not be remembered as much as his uncle, Napoleon Bonaparte, but he did more for the Louvre than any other ruler in Paris.
Yeah, completely. I mean, say what you will about him, but
Which a lot of people don't know enough to say anything about him, but because he is really, I mean, that really is kind of what he's remembered for, is what he did to Paris, and then also when he just kind of rolled over when it came to the siege of Prussia. But Napoleon III, as I said, he named himself emperor on December 2nd, 1852. And at that point, he wanted a ceremonial seat that was worthy of his title and was steeped in the history of France. And so he decided that he wanted to expand the Louvre. He first started over in the Denon wing. And then but we're kind of talking about the other side, but in the Denon wing, what you see today, with the original Denon wing of the 16th century was the Bordelot is what it was called. And that is now the Grand Gallery. And that goes along the Seine side. So the building kind of came out and just was way over onto the side that was closest to the Seine. And so what Napoleon III did is he added that whole area onto it. So if you're standing at the pyramid and you look up at the Dunant wing and you see what you see in front of you is all what Napoleon III added. He literally doubled the size of the Louvre when he added all these. And those are those 3 wings that go across. The wing in the middle of the Salle d'Etat, which is where the Mona Lisa is, of course. And then you have the red rooms, the Pompeii red rooms, and then all the floors below that. So he really did a ton of work on there. But then he decided that he wanted to expand the other side. So if you were standing there at the pyramid and you were looking north towards Montmartre, you could look straight through from, pretend the pyramid was back there then. You could look straight through there and look right at the Palais Royal. There was no building there at all. There was just nothing there. And so he decided that he wanted to have that all created, and he wanted to have the what we know as the Richelieu wing. He had that created for the Ministry of State, and it was going to be also the Ministry of State. He was going to put barracks in there. He was going to put the post office in there. The library was going to be in there. The Emperor's Library. All of this stuff was going to go in there, and so again, massive change to what we know of the Louvre. He put Louis Visconti, who was born in 1852. His grandfather created the Vatican Museum, which I thought was pretty cool. And his father was a curator of the paintings department at the Louvre. He was put in charge by Napoleon III to actually create all this. And there is a really cool painting, and it's down in, well, actually, it's not on display right now. I just recently was down there to go look for it. And it was not there, but it's a really cool painting. And in this painting, it was painted in 1853 by Ange Tissier, and it's called Visconti is presenting to Napoleon III the plans for the new Louvre. And in this one, you see Napoleon III and Empress Eugenie sitting down. Visconti is standing there in front of this blueprint, and on this blueprint behind him is the outline of the Louvre that we know of today, with the big black parts, or what it was, I should say, of that day. And then off to the side, you see where Visconti drew in the whole other side that was going to be for the Richelieu, because he also wanted to finish connecting the Tuileries to the Louvre. So just like the side on the south with the Grand Gallery, they wanted to do that on the north side, connecting the whole entire thing.
That's insane, like how much work and time. And I mean, whenever you walk into the Louvre, I'm like, oh, this was just all always here, like, but as you said, they added a lot more.
Yeah, and you do have, that's what's really kind of cool about it is you have, it's called the Grand Dessin. That was Henry IV. It was his grand design that he had this idea. And all the way through up until Francois Mitterrand in 1983, they all continued all of this. Even though you had, after Henry IV, you had Louis XIV, you had Napoleon the Bonaparte, you had all of these rulers, Napoleon III, that basically were so arrogant they wanted to make anything that they did more theirs than anything else. But every single one of them kept this original idea that Henry IV had in mind, and kind of kept adapting it, but keeping that in there. Napoleon III, from 1852 to 1865, that's when he worked on the Louvre. And because he was president from 1848 to 1852, and then that's when he had the coup d'etat, and then he was emperor until the 4th of September 1870, that's when he wanted to alter the plans. Like, he had his first plans, and then when he had the coup d'etat, he was like, now I'm taking it over even more and turning it into this, amazing place. The room that is where the Mona Lisa is now, that was the Salle d'Etat, so the room of the state, what it used to look like, I would give it anything to have that come back. The ceiling was this amazing ceiling that even had a balcony where people could sit in on either side of the entrances. Over the door, it had Napoleon on a horse, and the other side had Charlemagne on the horse. And I've seen like black and white etchings in my Louvre library of that, and it would be just amazing to be able to see that again. But they had this, and then they added the imperial riding stables and everything underneath that. And so when you go in there and you look up into this one part, if you know what you're looking at, look up at the capitals, and on the capitals, they all have animals. So horses and bears and everything. That's because that's where the stables were.
I always knew that stable part, but it was kind of hard to imagine like how you're describing it.
Yeah, it was. I mean, this one was like where they had like the fancy, ceremonial stables. And they had another entrance in the Cour Lufel. That was where they used, like, they put the fancy carriages and everything in, and had the big horseshoe ramp. That is reminiscent of the one that they copied from Fontainebleau. So it was, there was a lot of stuff. So when, the life of the Louvre from the 12th century till the 19th century, essentially, changed so many times. And if you know what you're looking for when you go in there, or you take somebody that knows all about the Louvre, hint, hint, then you could go through there and you could see how it changed. And there's even markings on the wall that kind of give you a little hint, if you know what to look for, who did what.
Yeah, definitely take Claudine with you guys. I mean, you might not remember all this. You need someone to tell you right then and there. It's more exciting.
I do have my wonderful client, Susan, that I love it when she comes a few times a year and she brings her little notebook. She has her Claudine notebook. And so we'll walk around and she takes notes.
I love that. We all need a
Yeah.
note taker.
It is a note taker, yeah. But in 1854 was the first time that it was ever mentioned in writing that the Ministry of State in the Richelieu wing was mentioned. It was also going to hold three other ministries: the telegraph, the printing press, and the military barracks. Sorry, on the 15th of August, 1857, which the 15th of August was the birthday of Napoleon Bonaparte, and so he tried to make it the Saint Napoleon Day, and then Napoleon III brought it back again. We don't celebrate that anymore. But they had a huge celebration in there, and they had a play called Le Quatre Âges de Louvre, so the 4 ages of the Louvre. It was performed at the theater in the Palais Royal, which I would love. I cannot find anything else about that. And I'm like, I need to see the transcript. I need everything. And I can't find anything.
I need everything.
I need everything. But in 1858, the first floor apartments of the ministry were created. We will do a whole separate one about that because people know them as the apartments of Napoleon III. But there's a little trick to that. He never actually stayed there. But we have to do one just all about that one. But the Richelieu wing, so the Pavillon Richelieu that's in the middle. So if you go to visit the Louvre, and you walk from the Rue de Rivoli into the pyramid, you go under the Pavillon Richelieu. And that before had a library above it on the first floor, but it was destroyed in the Bloody Week. And so when they decided in 1983, the physical definition of the project was laid out, doubling the space of the museum. And this was all under the Grand Louvre project of Francois Mitterrand. And Francois Mitterrand wanted to be the one that finally finished the grand design of Henry IV. And because the Louvre was getting thousands and thousands of people a day, and they used to just come into the door of the Denon wing, they were like, we have to figure out a way to make this work. And so that's why the pyramid was created. And with the pyramid, they were able to then get people in quicker, move them to the 3 wings. But at this point, you only have the Sully and the Denon wing. And so the Richelieu wasn't even open. So in 1983, they did the kind of laid out the definition. The final approval was done on February 3rd, 1984. And on February 13th, 1984, I.M. Pei, the architect, the Chinese-American architect, signed off on it that this is what he was going to do. There was a whole thing with how he was selected. Usually you have to do, and they even just did this with Notre Dame after the fire, where they open it up and they open up to the public and anybody could submit their idea for the design of this. But I.M. Pei hated doing that because he kind of got really screwed around on an earlier project because it was like this open competition. So he refused to do that. And Francois Mitterrand, he called him directly anyway and said, I just want you to do this. And so we're just going to be kind of sneaky about it. And everybody got upset. But when they did put the plan in, they had two archaeologists, Yves de Keith and Pierre-Jean Trombetto. They were given 2 years to excavate the entire Cour Napoleon. And then the backside, the Cour Carré, for Michel Fleury and a gentleman named Monsieur Couteau, they were given 1 year to do the Cour Carré. When they started digging into both of these places, they found a whole lot more than they were bargaining for, which we'll have to talk about another time. But after they finished all that, after the inauguration of the pyramid in 1989, that's when they were like, okay, now we're going to work on the Richelieu wing. So the whole Richelieu wing, when that was created and it was used for the ministries, when you look at it now, it's all normal and it just flows right into the rest of the museum. But when it was built and it was done by the ministries, it was much different. They had some of in the pavilions, the 3 pavilions that you have, there was 8 floors in there, because they had these mezzanines and they had offices, and at first they had no idea how they were going to do this, how they were going to adapt some places 6 to 8 floors into 3, so it would flow into the museum. And so what they ended up having to do was completely demolish the entire innards of the Richelieu wing, except for where the apartments were.
Whoa, that's really interesting. I had no idea.
Yeah, I have a couple books and it has pictures in it, and I'll put some of the pictures on my website, and it's fascinating. So you have the outside of this that's, in the 1852 to 1860 that it was built, and it was all done by Hector Lufel. And so they wanted to retain all of that as much as they could, but to make it work for the inside, so they just basically like just gutted it down to the basement where they had all of these fireplaces. They decided they weren't going to use the fireplaces. So what they did is they just poured the fireplaces with fresh concrete, and it hardened. And by doing that, it helped basically give the walls more structure to hold up. So because it's just literally was like 3 floors from and the roofs were taken off. And so it was just like, it was just the shell. It just was the 2 walls and then a few of the walls in between, but everything else was gone.
Wow, that's really cool how they were able to set that up.
Yeah, it is. It's really interesting. So then you have the Marly, the Cour Marly and the Cour Puget. The two, when you walk in there and you go through the Richelieu, and you could do this without even going into the Louvre, walk through there and look down on either side. That's the members entrance. And you could look down into these 2 courtyards. And originally, like the Marly, which is the one on the west side, the Marly was parking, just a parking lot for the ministry. And on the right, the Puget was the parking lot, offices, and the La Poste. And then the Corsaba, which is a smaller one that's just to the east of that one, that was what they used as a police barracks. So they had to figure out they could use those and use those for sculptures, because they had all of these incredibly heavy marble sculptures that had been at the Chateau de Marly and also the Tuileries. How were they going to do this? Because the rest of the Louvre, you've got some of the structure, the 16th century. You can't put a statue that weighs 4 tons on those floors because it would just go right through to the basement.
Could you imagine? Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
It'd be like, oops.
Shouldn't have put that there.
I guess that wasn't working. So they had to figure out how to do this. What's really fascinating that I learned, and now when I walk in there, I don't think, like, I love all these different things that I've learned, and now I definitely need to talk to a engineer or an architect. But like they even had to try to figure out, because like to get into the Richelieu, to get to where you could go through these courtyards, because it was underground, there was no way, because of the way that they did the pavilion above it, how were they going to link those so people could go? So they dug into the cellar, and they did that, and that is called the crypt yard, and they would go down there. And so now when I walk in there, like today, I'm like, okay, now I just know these things now, and it's so cool to think of. I just can't ever look at that the same anymore, knowing how they created it. So they did it so it would go deep underneath, and it would connect the 2 courtyards. And then the courtyards itself, each of them have 3 levels. And so they were able to do that because then they could level out all of the sculptures. They also did it so that they put trees in there. So there's trees in both of those courtyards, and it's a ceiling. So the ceiling was done by Pierre Rice. He was it was an Irish company, and he is Irish architect. And he did it so, like taking the idea of the pyramid itself, but because of the size of the pyramid and how it kind of is on this perfect square base, you couldn't do these with these rooms that were kind of rectangles, but they were kind of wonky rectangles. And so he created it using these aluminum tubes, that these aluminum tubes would also reject half of the zenith light coming in and the heat, and putting it back out to the outside. It would also help with the acoustics.
That's insane that they knew how to do all that stuff back then.
But no, this is 1990. Like this is 30 some odd
Not
years
that long ago.
It's not that long ago. And that's what's so amazing about this part of the Louvre. It's like, this is open since I graduated from high school. But
Oh
it
my
is,
God.
and the pieces of glass, there's like 60 different shapes of glass on these 2 ceilings of how they did it. But what's really cool is when you go in there and you sit there, sometimes I go in first thing in the morning. We went the other day, and Alex was like, well, there's just nobody here. Why is that? And I'm like, because they all go to the Dunant wing in the morning, and I could go sit in the Cour Puget for an hour, complete silence, all by myself. And you're sitting there, and it's like sitting out in the garden, and you've got trees, and it's quiet. And we were saying that all it needs is they need to have like some parakeets in there or something to fly around.
A little noise.
Just a little, some like sweet little birdies going around. But it is, I mean, it's fascinating to think of all these things that they had to do. They also, for this, had they had thinking of the light, they had to create it because it's what's best is to have real light, but you can't have direct light on paintings. So the top floor, the second floor, where you have the Medici cycle and you have the Northern European school and a part of a little bit of the French school, they had it so some of them are called actually cruciform staff ceilings, and so they kind of, some of them look like it has a cross up there. They did it so that they had it so it was bent at a 35-degree angle, and it was used a special paint that would help reflect the light and diffuse it, direct sunlight that came down. And this would also help with the heat. And so now I can't ever go in there and not look up. And I had somebody, teenager that really wants to be an engineer. So I was really excited because I was like, okay, I'm taking you over here. And I was telling him all about all of the ceilings and how they engineered these things, which is really fun. And it's neat because you do look up like at the ceiling in the Richelieu, or I'm sorry, in the Medici room, they are all at an angle. And you see that where it's at an angle, and now you know why.
Yeah, and you
It's
don't
pretty
even
cool.
have to be an engineering student to learn these things.
I know, but now that I was the expert on the floods from the episodes we did earlier this year, now I will be an engineer expert.
I mean, why not, really?
Yeah. But when they, for this whole section, because it was this great opportunity, they were able to, move even more. And this was, 30 years ago. So I've never been able to find something that says, like in 1939, when they emptied the Louvre, this is how many pieces are there. In 30 years ago, this is how many pieces. Now we know that there's over 35,000 pieces, and that's only 32% of what the Louvre owns in 408 rooms that are stretched out to be 8 miles.
Wow.
So obviously back then, I mean, we could have 3 Louvres now, and that's the only way they'd be able to put all this on display, or even more.
Yeah.
So for the Richelieu wing, they moved 5 of the 7 departments they added there. They did sculptures, antique orientals, paintings, graphic arts, which is not there anymore, and then objet d'art. So the first floor, where you have the apartments of Napoleon III, that's mostly all objet d'art. The second floor is where you have the northern schools I mentioned, and then the lowest floor, the ground floor, and then -1 is what they call it, is all of the statuary, the French statuary. So it gave them an amazing opportunity to change all that. But even though, of course, I have people all the time, they're like, which do you love more, the building of the Louvre or the art in it? And it really, really would be a hard thing for me to decide. If you put a gun to my head, I probably would say the building itself, just because it's so amazing. But one of the coolest things about the Richelieu wing has nothing to do with the art, and there's no art in the entire space. When you go in there and you go to the Richelieu wing and you scan your ticket, and then you go in and you take a right, and there's the escalator well. So the escalators, which, you wouldn't think like, well, that's a pretty cool part. But the way that IMPay designed it is they, again, gutted the entire thing. And this is a really great place to go to see basically how that is, because it's the 3 sections of escalators. And on either side of it, he created these huge walls made out of limestone from Burgundy, which is what they also used in the courtyards. And in it, though, they did these 2 huge circles. So when you're going up or down the escalator and you look to your left or right, you're looking into either the Cour Napoleon on one side or the Cour Puget on the other side. So it's not like you're at the mall, in an American mall, and you're going up this like endless, abyss of escalators. You're going up there, but you still are looking, and you're bringing in everything around you. And so it's pretty fascinating. One of the cool things that they were able to do by doing this project in the Richelieu wing is, because it was the 1990s, they were able, from the outside, it's completely the same. It's still the 19th century building, but they were also able to keep all the windows, because in the Sully and the Dunant wing, you see those windows on the outside, but you don't see that many windows when you're inside, depending on the rooms, because a lot of those they just covered up with a fake wall. The Grand Gallery should have 80 windows, and there's only like 4 that are open that you could see out, because there were so many windows, you can't hang art. You'd have just 10 feet in between windows for art. But what they were able to do with the Richelieu is keep most of those windows. You don't see any in the Medici gallery, but they were able to incorporate all that and then bring that, and vice versa, the inside to the outside, and also have it basically talk back to the Cour Napoleon and the 16th century Louvre.
Well, I love that I can go in there and listen to our podcast and remember all of this. And guys, remember, you can hire Claudine to do a private tour for you so she can tell you all this as you walk with her. And make sure you head over to ClaudineHemingway.com to learn more. Thanks for listening today, guys. If you're interested in learning more about Claudine, her tours, history, and the beautiful photographs that she posts all over Instagram, tune into her website, ClaudineHemingway.com.